Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Britain is not a beggar, you know. Prime Minister should stick on his points, and whatever he wants, he can have that from the European Union. So he should stick for the Britain, for the Westminster, for its safe for our children in future.
Okay, and you said on the right down the gang. Yes.
I think a lot of attacks have been made against David Cameron, but in my lifetime, it's the first time I've seen a British Prime Minister stand up to Europe and challenge them on their principles. And even we can argue whether these are long-term changes or not, but actually the process of negotiation has begun, and I'm voting in because I believe that once this first change is made, hopefully other European leaders will be brave enough to stand up and make more reforms in Europe.
And you on the gangway there.
Lisa Nandy's right. How can we ever be able to trade within the EU if we can't be part of it and we can't be the big player which affects it from the middle? However we want to go out and lose that power.
Is that regardless of what Cameron comes back from Brussels with?
Yes, because...
Doesn't affect you one way or the other?
It does affect it, but if we go out of Europe, we won't have that say.
I mean, if you'd had a referendum, if you just had Cameron just saying we'll have a referendum without any renegotiation, just want to know, because we haven't asked you since 1975. Well, you weren't born in 1975, but we haven't asked you. We're just going to ask you again, without any attempt at changing anything, would you still have voted in?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll have more of this as the weeks pass, I've no doubt. But let's just take this as a coda to it from Andy Chilton, please. Slightly off-beam, and quickly, I think. Yes.
Was actress Emma Thompson's description of Britain as a cake-filled, misery-laden, grey old island a fair reflection of our country, or just another example of metropolitan elitist snobbery?
All right. She said she felt European even though she lived in Great Britain. I'm living in Europe. Of course I am, as it were. Well, a tiny little cloud-bolted, rainy corner sort of Europe. Is that how you see Europe, June?
No.
I mean Britain?
No, not at all. I see Britain as a fantastic Victoria sponge. And I have to say, the one thing that I am slightly anti-EU on, being a pro-EU campaigner, is I see far too many French tarts in our bakeries. Oh, tatins. So rather than Emma's description, I would say I think we're a fantastic Victoria sponge, and I completely disagree with her on that one.
OK, Theo.
I don't actually recognise that description of the United Kingdom. We've got our problems, we have our downsides, we got the odd bit of rain, but at the end of the day...
Misery-laden, grey...
No, I think she's been in LA for too long. Too long. That's her problem.
All right. And Lisa?
We have our fair share of rain in the northwest, I can tell you that, but I don't recognise that description of Britain. I much prefer the celebration of Britain that we saw Danny Boyle put on during the Olympics opening ceremony, a Britain that has worked over the centuries, you know, to strive, to work together and stick up for people and to defend values of social justice around the world. And that's why I want to see us stay in the EU, because I want to see us not just have global influence in past centuries, but in the coming centuries as well.
OK. Poor old Emma Thompson. Anyone want to come to her defence?
No.
No, nobody. All right.
I want to
John,
come...
as a Scot.
I want to come to her defence. Her politics isn't great, that said. I noticed that she said that she'd lived in Great Britain and Scotland. Maybe she knows something about the next referendum that I don't. Look, one of the problems, I think, for people like Emma is that she's in the public eye and she sometimes says things, and then you've got all these very po-faced journalists, of which I used to be one, who then listen to what she says, make it into a big banner headline and blow it up out of all proportion. I suspect she probably regrets saying it. Is it the worst thing she could say? I doubt it. She seems very English to me, proud of being English, And I wish you'd lead a campaign, actually, since we're talking about cake names, to revert from cupcakes to good old-fashioned fairy cakes.
Oh, yeah.
Because what is wrong with a fairy?
This is getting wildly out of hand. Justine Greening, you are International Development Secretary. You go around the world and hear people talking of Great Britain. Do they think about Great Britain, that it's a tiny little cloud-bolted, rainy corner of sort of Europe?
I think they all know that it rains in Britain quite a lot, but in the end, I think most people recognise that it's a unique country with an amazing history. Yeah. We do some of the best comedy in the world, and we should be really proud of that. So I don't know whether, maybe Emma was having a bad day, but I'm sure that actually she loves our country as much. Well, I'm sure she loves our country as much as the rest of us do. At least I hope so.
But we'd have nothing to talk about, would we, if she didn't say something?
Or if it didn't rain.
No, we would. We've got masses to talk about. I'm rather irritated we spent so long on that.
When it comes to her comments, if it wasn't for Britain, would she be in the position that she was in now? And the hint's in the name, really, isn't it? Great Britain.
OK. Now, look, we better get on. Just before we go to the next question, a reminder about where we're going to be next week. It's Poole, and the week after that, it's Liverpool. Funny verbal twist there, all the pools. We made a list of pools: Welsh Pool, Hartlepool, Ullapool, Blackpool, Pontypool. You can bring in others. Anyway, it's Poole and Liverpool. The website there says how to get to us. I'll give that at the end again. David Ho, please.
Do you agree with the Pope that Donald Trump is not a Christian?
OK, let's deal with this one. The Pope said today on his aeroplane, or the other day on his way back from Mexico, that a person who thinks only about building walls, referring to the wall between Mexico and the United States, is not a Christian. And Trump replied the Pope would only wish that and pray that Donald Trump had been president if the Vatican was attacked by ISIS. I don't know. John Nicholson.
Who knows what is in Donald Trump's dark soul? I don't think it's for me to say whether he's a Christian or whether he's not a Christian. He certainly doesn't seem to abide by some of the basic tenets of Christianity, as I understand them. Love thy neighbour, being one, for example. The Good Samaritan being another. Doesn't seem to be too engaged with that. No. He's a dreadful man. And the good thing is he's going to, if he gets the nomination, he'll get absolutely whipped in the general election. Because the problem with the Republicans these days is that in order to win the Republican nomination, you've got to go so far to the right that it makes it almost impossible for you to steer back to the centre and to win a general election. And that's why when we look at American politics, the Democrats just keep winning, because America is no longer a white male country. And if you go out of your way to alienate Muslims and Mexicans and gays and every other conceivable minority, you cannot bring together the coalition necessary to win an election. And I'm so looking forward to the night of the election and watching the smirk wiped off his face.
It's a bit of a tricky one for you, of course, because you welcomed him. Alex Salmond welcomed Trump to Scotland to build an enormous golf course on a nature reserve, and now you want to ban him from coming to Scotland. So you're all over the shop on Trump.
No, I don't want to ban him. I mean, there's an argument that the Home Secretary should be consistent with the people that she declines to let into the country. But I know you like this question, David, because you've asked it before. But of course, it's very important to remember that the person that first...
What question have I asked before?
The question about Donald Trump being welcomed by the SNP was in fact the Labour Party that made him a trade ambassador for Scotland. I just think it's worth putting that on the record.
Alex Salmond, I heard him saying he was wrong to have supported him.
Yeah, but the party that made him a trade ambassador was the Labour Party. But look, he's a businessman. Once upon a time, he worked in business and he provided jobs for people. And of course, in Scotland, we want jobs. But I certainly don't support him as a politician.
Theo Paphitis.
I'm just staggered that they're even treating him seriously, to be honest with you. I mean, I've been watching the hustings and on television and some of the things that he's been saying, and you just wonder what he has to say for people to say, stop, this man has got to go. because he keeps pushing the boundary every single time. And you just think he's going to push it. And I just actually believe it's a publicity stunt, and he's hoping at some stage he can get off the wagon and go back to doing what he's doing. But it seems the American people just keep encouraging him. It's amazing.
Justine Greening.
I suspect that, ironically, this is exactly what Donald Trump loves. It's more publicity. And he then gets to say something outrageous on the back of it. I think the serious point is that he is in this seemingly leading position in the Republican race. And I think as much as we might think some of the things he says are funny, a bit of a joke, actually, the American election for president is no joke. And I think we have to wait and see how things work out. But I do hope that by the time we get the two final frontrunners from the Democrats and the Republican, they are people who are serious politicians with serious proposals, and that we move away from this almost reality TV style of contest that we've seen so far, because we need the person who is in that role of president to be someone, frankly, who's going to be helping us to solve problems around the world, not creating them.
But does it worry you that American democracy, the democratic process can produce Trump at this stage with this amount of support?
I think the problem is that, unlike here in the UK, where there are lots of seats that are marginal seats, they switch between the parties. I won a seat from Labour and I'm a Conservative. There are far fewer of those in the United States. So what happens is the real contest is becoming the candidate for your party for the state or the seat that you're going in. And what that means is that people tack off to the extreme. And actually, I think one of the good things about the British system is, A, we have first past the post, but B, actually we do have seats that switch regularly during the election. And that means people representing those communities have to stay on their toes and do it well. Otherwise, people just simply get someone from an alternative party.
Okay. June Sarpong.
I think before we get to whether or not he's a Christian, the question is whether or not he's a human being. I mean... I think he is absolutely frightening, and the fact that he's got this far should scare us all very much. And I'm hoping, just as Theo said, at some point people are going to wake up and say, you know what, this isn't a joke anymore. This is serious. There are jobs at stake. There are lives at stake. And in terms of what this means about national security, this man is a threat to all of us, and he needs to go.
Lisa.
I mean,
come to you.
I don't feel at all qualified to
judge
tell
his
you
religion.
whether he's a Christian or not. But
Do you think the Pope is qualified to judge?
I'm sure the Pope is a lot more qualified than I am. But I mean, what I would say is that anyone who preys on people's insecurities and does it at the expense of some of the most vulnerable people, not just in his country but in the world, isn't fit to lead. And I think that before we get a bit preachy and complacent about ourselves, I think we should reflect on the fact that we have a Prime Minister who just recently stood up at the dispatch box and referred to people fleeing persecution in Syria as a bunch of migrants. And I'm saying this not just because I was appalled by what David Cameron says, but because I think there are times in this country when we stray into that level of debate ourselves, and we should always be vigilant to make sure that we don't. Because as we're seeing in America, you know, you start with something that looks like just adding a bit of colour to politics. You start with something that looks like a bit of a sideshow, and what you end up with is that it gathers pace, and then at the end it has real and profound consequences for people's lives. And whether Trump gets the nomination or not, whatever happens next, there will be people who have already suffered as a result of what that man has said and done.
Okay. Yes, you say.
I lived in the United States in the early 80s, and at that stage Ronald Reagan was president, which was scary enough. But I think the recent endorsement of Donald Trump by Sarah Palin was a new low for American politics, and I think that the sensationalisation and the cheap rhetoric is a poor excuse for good government and good governance.
Okay. And the woman there with spectacles, I'll come to you and then we'll go on. Yes, up there.
So you mentioned democracy in America. I don't think that the issue is Trump, it is the actual system. The system isn't democratic at all, and if you listen to a lot of his supporters, they're not as much listening to what he's saying. Their main reason for supporting him is that he has money and that he's not listening to pressure groups. So the issue is how much American politics is run by money. People aren't really listening to what he's saying.
Nandy.
I think, in all honesty, I think it does make the general population wonder just how farcical politics itself is becoming. And that probably has a greater bearing on any other politician in the world if they're trying to be serious and they're seeing this kind of farcical thing going on. Then
That it damages our politics as well.
Absolutely, it does, yes.